Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Well, for the second time in probably 3 weeks, I've chosen to go grocery shopping on a Sunday morning and gotten to the checkout at the Kroger, and they said, "We don't sell wine on Sunday mornings." And I went, "Oh." First time I was like, I have never been buying wine before on a Sunday morning. And the second time it was, "Oh yeah, I found that out last week. I guess that was Sunday, huh? Is it Sunday now? I don't know. What day is it? Time is a lie."
You're like, how do you even know it's Sunday, ma'am or sir? The blue law should no longer exist. If no day is different than the other, get rid of the blue laws. Like it's old timey anyway.
I didn't have any beer in my cart, but I don't know if it actually impacts beer as well, or if it's just wine, which would be even weirder. Like all of the liquor laws are extremely confusing.
I guarantee you some politicians made sure that beer is okay on Sunday mornings.
I mean, no one's tailgating with wine for a Browns game, so
you don't know that. So speaking of the Browns, this is our NFL draft recap-ish kind of show. The NFL draft was this weekend, 3 days of it, 7 total rounds, 10 total Buckeyes, and then late Sunday morning, we all got on a conference call with Ohio State head coach Ryan Day to talk about it. And so that's what we did. And Tom, big surprise, Chase Young, number 2 overall. Crazy.
You know, one of the most unpredictable draft picks I can imagine. I don't remember seeing a single mock draft that had him going there, which is unusual for that high in the draft.
I think we said it last season, that he is basically a can't miss guy, and now everybody else has been echoing what we were the first to say about him, was that, hey, this guy's pretty good, and now everybody else is like, hey, Chase Young is pretty good. Those 2 idiots in Ohio were right about him. And we were also right about Jeff Okudah being good. He went number 3 to the Detroit Lions. Though there was some drama there. They weren't sure if the Lions would trade down to 5 and still try to get him. But they stuck there at 3 and landed him. And he is the highest defensive back selected this century, but was the same number 3 spot that Sean Springs went in 1997. So that's some good company for Jeff Okudah, who came to Ohio State and has openly talked about wanting to be on the wall along with the other great cornerbacks their photographs and all the other great players. I was surprised to learn, reading through Jerry Emmig's notes, the Ohio State SID, that Jeff Okudah is the first unanimous first-team All-American corner at Ohio State. Now, there's been plenty of All-American corners at Ohio State, but he was the first one to be unanimous by all of the services. And of course, Tom, he also had the Thorpe Award stolen from him by Grant Delpit, but that's another complaint for another day. But Jeff Okudah, pretty good as well.
Yeah, the Thorpe Award wall is a different wall. I think his goal was the positional banners, so he will almost certainly be up there. Yeah, I was shocked at the that stat. Like that was one of those, like, that can't be right. Like Jerry's not usually wrong about stuff, but that was like, really? Like Sean Springs, number 3 overall, Denzel Ward, number 4 overall in the NFL draft. Neither of them were unanimous All-Americans. That seemed bizarre, but yeah, he's another one where, Chase Young and Jeff Okudah came in 2017 and both got on the field pretty much right away. They were both contributing players as true freshmen, those are not, defensive end is not unheard of to do that, but to be a contributing player as a corner, as a true freshman, is pretty unusual. And that's a pretty good marker for, hey, this guy's going to have a pretty good career here. And they both were people who came in as 5-star prospects, made an immediate impact, just very consistently did things the right way, and you consistently progressed and grew in their games, and seemed like they took coaching very well, and went from players who contributed as freshmen to players who were pretty solid starters as sophomores, and then superstars as juniors, and then off to the NFL and top 5 picks. So that's the best case scenario for a 5-star prospect, and Ohio State got 2 of them in one class.
Yeah, and both guys the entire way were seen as this was going to be their future. This was their inevitability. Top 5 picks in the NFL. And you've seen many guys come through with that expectation who flame out, but these 2 guys, like it was never doubt. They never didn't look like they were going to be this, and so that's a credit to them. Credit to the eagle-eyed scouts at Ohio State to know that Chase Young and Jeff Okudah were pretty good. So, and then of course the ability to develop them. But yeah, all along those guys were never they were never living up to their billing. And then to go 2 and 3 in the draft is also a credit to our expectations. So good job on us for getting that right.
I don't know if we want to take I don't know if we want to take credit for where Chase Young got drafted, because I'm not sure we want to admit that Daniel Snyder listens to the show. I don't know if that's something we want on us.
We will wash our hands of this one for a good 40 seconds, soap and water, and then just for good measure, some sanitizer. And what I've been doing, Tom, I'm wearing plastic gloves as I wash my hands just to be super secure.
Can never be too careful.
Yeah, trap all the germs inside the glove and then keep them there. The surprise of the first round was Damon Arnett going 19th overall to what is not a surprise, the Raiders, who, they like to do these sort of things. Like it was not a surprise that they drafted Henry Ruggs, the fastest receiver in the draft, with the 12th overall pick. That's what the Raiders do. That's what they've done since the 80s and 70s and, way back draft. That's what they've always done. No matter how many Davises, Al Davis, Mark Davis, no matter how many are alive or dead, they draft fast receivers. And then to go and get Damon Arnett, we talked to Ryan Day today, and Ryan, that was a surprise, and he's basically like, I was not surprised. Kerry Combs told us last week, don't be surprised. And Day said what he was more surprised about is that people kept talking about him as a 2nd-round pick, because this is a guy who was a 3-year starter at Ohio State. And yes, we know what you're going to say about the 2017, 2018 seasons, but you're a starting corner at Ohio State. You're an elite cornerback. And then this past year was exactly what a 1st-round corner looks like. I mean, go back to Bradley Roby, Eli Apple, Garyon Conley, Denzel Ward, Jeff Okudah. Like he is exactly what you would see from a 1st-round corner. And if you ignored what happened before and you only saw the 2019 edition of Damon Arnett, you're not going to be surprised that he's 19th overall in this draft. And so that's where he won. It's been a long story, Tom, long 5 years, ups and downs, probably the first number 46 in Ohio State history to, be drafted in the 1st round. I don't know, not that he had to wear that in the games, but we saw him in that terrible, ugly jersey in practice. But really, really difficult to not be happy for a guy who has maybe taken more grief than any Ohio State 1st-rounder in global history.
Well, he had just 2 years ago was getting a lot of grief, and was also in, some of the grief was justified and some of it probably wasn't. He was also, I think he pretty openly admitted, a little bit of a knucklehead earlier in his career, and probably wasn't taking academics as seriously as he should. And now he's got a college degree. He's a 1st-round NFL draft pick. Like, that's a pretty cool turnaround story. I mean, ESPN was probably going a little hard on trying to hit some of the somber notes in the lives of draft prospects. And if you have watched more than 3 minutes of the draft, you know what I'm talking about. Damon Arnett, though, is one of those stories that, he had some problems of probably a little bit of his own creation earlier in his career. And some were things he did, and some were things that were just kind of thrust upon him by the OSU fan base. But he overcame all of it. I mean, that's a pretty inspiring story to go from, it's a little bit like the Cardale Jones story, where he had the silly tweet earlier in his career and kind of had a reputation as a little bit of a knucklehead, and then turned into a really solid player, graduated, and has done pretty well for himself. It's like, that's good to see. Not everyone is going to be, the perfect model of decision making from day one. That's just not how being a teenage male works. As someone who was a teenage male at one point, like, I can tell you, yep, I was not always making the perfect decisions at all times. But to see guys who really have turned themselves around and really made the absolute most of themselves, like, that's awesome. That's what it's supposed to look like. That's what success looks like. And good for Damon Arnett for sticking with it and listening when Chris Carter said, "Hey, you should come back. You're not ready yet." And I mean, that really paid off, because he, this time last year, he would have been, what, a 4th round pick, maybe? Yeah. I mean, kind of mid rounds. That's a big difference in terms of your likelihood of sticking with the team, how much money you're making now. I mean, all of it. And that's cool. Like, that's something that he really, there's been a lot of talk about, all the people who are, like, completing college and not getting to do a graduation this year, or the people who are completing high school not getting to do a graduation. Like, that, hearing your name called in the first round of the NFL draft, like, that's that moment for Damon Arnett. Like, that's the moment it all paid off, and you kind of get that public recognition for it. And that was really cool to see.
And Day even talked about how Damon Arnett and Terry McLaurin are both examples of guys who they told them, come back for another year. And so now it has paid off for both of those guys. The contract difference between being a 4th rounder last year and being a 1st rounder where he was drafted this year, you're talking about around $10 million in contract in those 4 years. And as a 1st rounder, then there's a 5th year team option, which would probably be another $4 million. So you're talking, for a $14 million decision to come back. And so that's, obviously, I think we all believed he should come back. And Todd, we even talked about it on a podcast, and we're very adamant after he decided to come back. Like, hey, I know people out there think this is a bad thing because they are telling us and tweeting at us and posting messages that this is a bad thing. This is not a bad thing. This is a very, very good thing. And Tom, just like we were right about Chase Young when nobody liked him, we were right about Jeff Okudah when nobody liked him. We were right that it was good that Damon Arnett was back. And I just wanted to recognize you and me as being a perfect 3 for 3 so far. So pat yourself on the back. I'll pat myself on the back. I'm sure others out there listening right now are patting us virtually on the back. And that's okay, as long as it's just virtual.
Yeah, stay 6 feet away, and we're all fine here. Everything's good.
Tom, when Damon Arnett was drafted, that gave the 2015 roster, the 2015 Ohio State roster, 12 first-round picks, which, and I wrote about it. I don't know if that's a record. It sure seems like a lot. And now you're talking about around 35 draft picks from that team, with the possibility of one more next year in Justin Hilliard. So that when people say that's the greatest Ohio State team of all time, I still say it's not, but it might be. The more accurate argument would be the most talented. And just based on the first rounders, granted, Joe Burrow as a freshman in 2015 was not the same Joe Burrow that he was last year at LSU, but a dozen first rounders on one roster is freaking ridiculous.
Well, it is. It's completely nuts. And that is, if you had to put together a list of the most underachieving, probably isn't the right word, but right, frustrating maybe Ohio State teams ever, there may be a couple others. I mean, some of when the Super Softs were Super Juniors and Super Seniors, and somehow managed to not win the national championship either year, or a couple of the late Archie Griffin's teams that probably should have won national championships and didn't. Those are on that list, but man, that 2015 team, like, holy smokes, that you look at the results that year, and just the teams that were hanging with them, like Northern Illinois gave that team a game. Like the third, they should have been able to run out their third team and beat Northern Illinois by the score that they actually beat Northern Illinois by. I mean, it's amazing. And that is the worst hangover. I'm sure most people have some story about the worst hangover of their life, and they swear they're never going to drink again. Like that was the year that was like, I'm never going to play football again. That was the hangover that Ohio State had that year after the national championship. Just inexplicable how bad that team was. And I'm saying that as if they didn't go 12-1 and win the Fiesta Bowl, but just absolutely, it should have been so much more than it was. Just that was a year that just I bet everyone on that team wishes they had that season back to try again.
Truly an indictment of the quarterback play, as you said, Tom. Good point. The guys that we don't even mention of those 12, you got Michael Thomas in the second round, Tyquan Lewis in the second round, Sam Hubbard in the third, Raekwon McMillan in the second, Jerome Baker in the third. All of these guys are, Pat Elflein. It's impressive. One of those guys who was not on the 2015 team because he was a junior in high school was J.K. Dobbins, who went in the second round, 55 overall to Baltimore. And Tom, not that either of us watch a whole bunch of NFL, but Baltimore has always had a running game. You go back to Jamal Lewis and Ray Rice, and now this past season with Mark Ingram and Lamar Jackson. Now you throw in J.K. Dobbins, and just as a video game aficionados, like Lamar Jackson and J.K. Dobbins, that's a pretty interesting toy, to have those two guys, both dynamic. Will probably both do very well feeding off of each other, frustrating for defenses. And, it's just too bad that J.K. Dobbins has stone hands, apparently, and is also the fourth or fifth best, I think, running back. Was he the fifth one off the board? Coming off the board.
Yes, fifth.
After, what's his face from Florida State?
Yep. Cam Akers.
Cam Akers. And Cam Akers is great, played behind a terrible line. But, man, number 5, fifth running back. Like, I get what Kansas City did with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who is a pass catcher. I could see him catching 1,000 yards and rushing for 1,000 yards. That's a fit thing, and good for them. But, man, I to see J.K. Dobbins drop like that, but then drop to a situation where he is going to be used and it's a good fit. You see that quite often where guys are dropping, but then they end up in the exact perfect situation for them.
Yeah, I mean, I go back to Aaron Rodgers, who had, I think, something of an uncomfortable draft day and ended up in a great spot with Green Bay. I think I would be very surprised if J.K. Dobbins did not have a better pro career by, pick whatever measure you want, career yardage, average yards per rush, or, number of years in the league, than multiple guys who were picked ahead of him. I mean, Clyde Edwards-Helaire was the first running back off the board to the Chiefs. That was a spot that I think you saw a lot of people thinking that Dobbins could end up going. Then DeAndre Swift from Georgia was the second one. He went to the Lions in the second round. And then Jonathan Taylor from Wisconsin was the third. He went to the Colts. And Cam Akers fourth to the Rams. I would not be surprised at all if J.K. Dobbins had a better pro career than Jonathan Taylor. Like not at all. He just. Ryan Day was asked about Dobbins and did Dobbins make a mistake leaving this year if he slid that far. I don't know what Dobbins does next year to get picked higher. He is what he is, and I think he's going to be a pretty good pro running back, and I think he's in a very good spot for to put next to Lamar Jackson. That's going to be a fun offense. Because those are two guys who were just a ton of fun to watch in in college, and
Man.
and obviously Jackson has turned into a pretty good pro quarterback as well. But Cam Akers was one of those people. I heard his name called, and I kind of went, "Oh yeah, Cam Akers," because you completely forgot that he was a thing.
He was a 5-star guy in high school.
Yeah, 5-star, number 1 running back in the country, and he's one of those. And if we end up talking about Michigan players later, we'll probably talk about another guy who falls in this category. But he's one of those guys where 5-star prospect. You wonder, like, if you had it to do all over again, what are the odds you would have chosen the school that you chose? Because, I mean, you hit on it a little bit, but he was running just behind garbage offensive lines on teams that just went absolutely nowhere. And it's like, boy, if he had it to do all over again, would he? I think Ohio State was one of the finalists certainly, and he was looking at Ole Miss at one point too, which I don't know if that would have gone any better than Florida State did, but
yeah, it made more money.
Yeah. Boy, if he had that to do all over again, he would have been a pretty good guy to split carries with J.K. Dobbins at Ohio State. That would have been a pretty fun running back room if they could have talked both of those guys into coming.
Yeah, I'm with you. I expect, and we've been saying this, he was the best running back. He was the best player on the field every single time. So, I can only go off of what I've seen with my own eyes, just like I did when I said Chase Young was going to be good and Jeff Okudah were going to be good. That was my eyes, Tom. That was from watching them. I don't even know what recruiting rankings are. That was just from watching film. All right. Now, speaking of recruiting rankings, and Devon Hamilton went in the 3rd round to Jacksonville, number 73 overall pick. Devon Hamilton, if I recall correctly, was the number 998th player in the 2015 class, probably somewhere around like the number 60 or 70 defensive tackle, in the 20s maybe in terms of Ohio prospects. And just really exploded as a 5th-year senior. But you also saw it coming. You saw it coming over the past couple of seasons. Remember, like 2016 is when they started playing, because they were both Robert Landers and Devon Hamilton came in together, redshirted in 2015. 2016, Landers kind of burst onto the scene with his quickness and his shortness, and had 7.5 tackles for loss. And Devon Hamilton was kind of behind him, but was getting some time. 2017, Hamilton got some more time. But by 2019, it was like Hamilton had become the starter. Landers was always the starter in front of him. And then Hamilton comes in and just takes over that position last year. They split it with Robert Landers and Tommy Togiai, but I think Hamilton had 100 more snaps than anybody else, and was just a disruptive force as a nose tackle. And Ohio State hasn't had that too often. The nose tackles are, more just to be there, guys. Just stop the run, and then we'll take you out on passing downs. But Hamilton was, he could play 3 downs if you wanted to. Was like Michael Bennett, when he had to play some nose tackle, he was disruptive. Obviously, Big Daddy was crazy, but man, what Devon Hamilton became, what he was able to do, and to be a 3rd rounder, I don't know that anybody saw that coming into last year. But Tom, we continued to watch him grow and play, and then as you watch him last year, you're like, this guy's going to go pretty high, which is impressive considering the kind of throwaway last minute recruit he was for the Buckeyes back in 2015.
Well, the really funny thing is you said, I think he was number 998. And I'm like, no. You're thinking of Pat Elflein. Pat Elflein was number 998. I looked it up. Both Devon Hamilton and Pat Elflein were exactly the number 998 player in the 247 composite in their respective recruiting years. And both of them ended up being 3rd round picks. And if Devon Hamilton has the kind of if Devon Hamilton ends up having the kind of pro career that Pat Elflein had, or is in the process of having, then yeah, I think he'd be pretty darn happy with that. That's a pretty weird coincidence. But yeah, Hamilton is someone that if you didn't have Chase Young there off the edge and you didn't have Zach Harrison kind of being the exciting new guy, I think people would have paid a lot more attention to Devon Hamilton. But I mean, just that interior spot, it's not the, it's not the glamour position on the defensive line. It's kind of the engine that makes it go. But he had an incredible year last year, and I think people don't necessarily appreciate how good he was. He got to the point where he was putting up stats that you don't normally see guys in that position put up. What did he finish with? 5.5, 6.5 sacks last year, something like that. I mean, it was like he was putting up pretty solid defensive end numbers as a pass rusher, and doing it from the nose tackle spot. Like, that is not normal. But he was fantastic. And he is as much a testament to Larry Johnson's development as a coach, his ability to develop talent and develop players. It's not just, I can take the 5-star Chase Young and turn him into a first-round draft pick. Like, also, I can take the number 63 defensive tackle in the nation and turn him into a third-round draft pick, the number 998 player in the country. I'm just going to scroll down right now and look at where guys who are ranked ahead of Devon Hamilton in Ohio that year, where they went to school. Just to let's see, above him was Purdue, Wisconsin, Michigan State, Cincinnati, Ohio, Cincinnati, Indiana, Cincinnati, Stanford, Toledo. Like, he's ranked behind a bunch of MAC kids. All the kids who go to West Virginia and Syracuse and Kentucky, like all that, kind of the second tier of kids that just weren't quite up to the Ohio State kind of standard. He was behind all of them. And Robert Landers too. Robert Landers was ranked 26th in the state that year. He was not anything that was considered a real Ohio State level player, and they took both of them, and both of them turned into incredibly productive players throughout their careers. And for Hamilton to be able to now be in a position to make an NFL roster and have a nice career, like, that's awesome. Good for him. And now Ohio State has another Hamilton coming in. Devon Hamilton's younger brother, Ty Hamilton, is a member of the 2020 recruiting class. So, but his rankings weren't super high, so you probably don't expect anything out of him, right? I mean, there's no track record there.
Right. That's just, you throw a favor to a family, I'm sure, Yeah. No, but the jump that Devon Hamilton has made, that's why, like, you want to bring Ty Hamilton on board? The track record is there. As Urban Meyer and Ryan Day talk about, it's testimony. There's testimony there for the Hamilton genes, and Ty Hamilton should be fine. After that, then it was Malik Harrison 25 spots later to Baltimore in the third round. Another example, and I tweeted it out at the time, of Baltimore doing what the Browns won't, and meaning taking Ohio State players. But this is, if you're a linebacker, there's like two spots: Baltimore or Pittsburgh, and then you'll be set. So he's at Baltimore, a guy that can play any spot in a 4-3, any spot, and I would say a 3-4 because I don't know that he's necessarily a pass rusher in a 3-4, but could probably do it as you need it. But I mean, just a versatile, athletic guy. Led the Buckeyes in tackles the last 2 years, and I don't know what it was that dropped him so low. I mean, he had 16.5 tackles for loss last year, which was the most for an inside linebacker at Ohio State since Ryan Shazier went crazy with like 23.5 in 2013. I guess, Tom, he didn't have huge numbers, and maybe that's one thing, but also the defense this year, like, there weren't a lot of tackles to be made because there are a lot of 3-and-outs. I just think he's really solid, and maybe that's, maybe really solid is third rounder. And if you're spectacular, then you're a first rounder, I guess.
Well, he's someone who I feel like from almost day one, he was just sort of like under the radar at Ohio State. Just that, he just was never. I don't think people ever quite appreciated how good he was, because he was never the like superstar high tackle stat guy. He didn't come in real highly rated. He was 683rd overall, 26th player in Ohio. So he was not someone that came in with a whole bunch of recruiting buzz. And then when he was even like 2018, he was the one guy on the defense that we just like. When you were going back and looking at why is everything exploding everywhere? Like, it was never him. Like, even when things were bad, he was just kind of forgotten because he was the guy who was, he was fine. He was almost never the problem. And he led the team in tackles last year with 75, and you mentioned 16.5 for loss and 4.5 sacks. But it wasn't, he didn't put up 130 tackles or anything like that. He was just consistently very solid. A very, like, he's one of those glue guys that it's a little bit of a testament to him that he was picked as high as he was, just because, I think a lot of people, if they were going through the 2019 Ohio State team, he's someone who people, the average fan is probably not going to name as one of the guys they would have, thought would be one of the top 5 or 6 guys picked off of that team, in this draft. He was always just consistently good, a very good performer, and just like I said, he never seemed to be the problem. He was just always doing his job. He was always just a very, very, very consistent player for Ohio State. And yeah, maybe the Steelers and the Ravens are better at doing the player evaluation thing than, say, the Browns and the Bengals. It's not like they have any kind of head-to-head competition to judge that sort of thing on. So I guess, we'll have to see. It'll just remain a mystery, I guess. I don't know.
It'll just come down to analytics, I guess.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
But he's also quiet. Like, Malik Harrison is quiet. And then you talk about how he's ignored. Maybe he's the middle child. Maybe that's what it is. And, but he's got the size to do whatever you need. And then, so he was a 3rd rounder. The Buckeyes had to wait until the 6th round. Nothing happened in the 4th round. Nothing happened in the 5th round.
We missed Jonah Jackson.
Oh, shoot. Then he's not even listed on my list here. Yeah, Jonah Jackson to the Lions in the 3rd round?
3rd round. Yeah, he was between Devon Hamilton and Malik Harrison. Yep.
Okay, yeah, because that one, he was. I talked to a scout the other day, and he had him, I think, as number 3 overall guard. And so, we never saw anything bad from Jonah Jackson. Only good. Led the Buckeyes in knockdowns. Was a complete teammate who could have come in here to Ohio State and just rub people the wrong way because he came in to take somebody's job. He didn't do that. Could have just... Coming from Rutgers, you don't know how to do stuff. It's a different type of world coming to Ohio State. But he was so hungry to win and to be on a winner, and was the perfect addition for this offensive line. And for him only being around a year, like, he has forged lifelong bonds with the entire Ohio State offensive line, including the guys who didn't get to play because he was there. And I really think he's going to be solid in the NFL because he can play any of the 3 interior spots. And there's plenty of people who think he could be a really, really solid center because we've talked to him. He's smart. He's he's one of those picks that maybe fans or whatever is like, oh, an interior lineman. But then 10 years later, you're like, I'm glad we still have Jonah Jackson on this team.
Yeah, my in-laws are Detroit Lions fans, and my son has recently, I think, sort of caught that from them. He's not washing his hands enough or something. I'm not sure. But he asked me about Jonah Jackson. I went, oh, no, he's going to be really good. He's going to be, I don't know that Jonah Jackson's going to be an NFL Hall of Famer, but what's the average, the over under on Jonah Jackson's NFL career, 8 seasons, 10 seasons. Like it seems like there's almost no way that doesn't work, where he's just a very solid NFL starter for a long time. He's just, you talked about it. He came in, just fit in. He's personable. He's likable. He's smart. He's got a little bit of a nasty streak on the field. Like he is a prototypical interior lineman. Like he's a little bit mean. He's, a little bit like, I think Wyatt Davis fits in that mold as well, where, Davis and Josh Myers and Jonah Jackson, all three of them, like they were all just extremely likable guys off the field and fun to talk to. And you see him on the field, like you just watch there was a play, one of the highlights that I think I saw maybe when they were showing him on TV after he got picked, but I think it was against Indiana, and there were just a couple people and a couple people blocking one of the Indiana players, like they were like doing a handoff block, and right at the end of the play, Jonah Jackson just jumps on the guy. They've knocked him down, and Jonah Jackson just jumps on the guy. Like it was just a wonderful little encapsulation of the mean streak that you need to have to be successful, and he definitely has it. He's going to be, I think, a pretty good pro for them.
Yeah, and we talked about it coming into the year, just the difference in mentality from the 2019 offensive line from the 2018 offensive line, which was a more passive, not nasty group of guys. And then, that changed clearly with Wyatt Davis and Josh Myers and Jonah Jackson. And Wyatt Davis, talking to him, he kind of gets angry that he's not as nasty as Jonah Jackson, didn't have as many knockdowns. So, when you aspire to be an angrier offensive lineman, that's not too bad. And Wyatt Davis will probably see him in the top 2 rounds next year. So then we go to the 6th round, and Jordan Fuller went to the Rams with the 199th pick. I was joking with Tom earlier, and I said before the show, I'm going to have you break down the Rams depth chart at safety, so get ready for that. We won't need to do that, but I don't know about Jordan Fuller, who was always nearly perfect at Ohio State, was solid, did everything you needed him to do. But I don't know that he was never Malik Hooker, even though he took over from Malik Hooker after the 2016 season and did really well. There was just the lack of, I guess, big plays maybe concerns me, and I think maybe he dropped because perhaps the speed wasn't there or whatever, because he's a really good athlete, but I assume it's a speed thing, maybe a lack of making plays. But then I look at him, and he goes in the 6th round. Could he be Kurt Coleman, who went in the 7th round and has been hanging around for forever? Kind of a guy who lands on a team, starts, plays a lot, and is always trying to be replaced, but can't ever be replaced by whatever the guys they're trying to draft in front of him. But yeah, I don't know really what to make of Jordan Fuller, other than he is a great teammate and did great for Ohio State. Brings the GPA up for sure. I don't know how long his football career will last, but he's one of those guys who's going to be successful well beyond football, because he is much more than football. But also just his focus, I wouldn't be surprised to see him stick around. I don't know, I don't know what he does that is spectacular, other than he's just solid and he does his job. He's a great tackler. We know that.
Yeah, he's someone who is, you could say a lot of the same things about him that we just said about Malik Harrison. On a defense that was terrible in 2018, like Jordan Fuller was almost never the guy who was the problem. He was just very consistently for 3 years, the guy at the back end of that defense that was not letting big plays happen. Sometimes big plays happen, and it's not always not always his fault. But
Isaiah Pryor,
you got a little sneeze there, a little cough. You got to maybe get that checked out.
Good.
Fuller ran a 4.67 in the 40-yard dash at the combine, and I'm sure that was something that made teams kind of wonder if he's was fast enough to really be an impact maker at the NFL level. But you look at him in some of the biggest moments last year in the Clemson game, I mean, you said he didn't make too many big plays, but he may have made more big plays than he got credit for at times. Maybe in some big moments last year, perhaps. And there were some big plays, that Clemson hit that it was not when Jordan Fuller was the guy back there. That's the fact that he prevented big plays to the degree that he did against pretty good teams. This was not just, he did a good job against Rutgers and Florida Atlantic. Like, no, he was pretty darn good against the teams that were playing guys that are also getting drafted right now. So, yeah, I think I would. I would love to have a guy like Jordan Fuller on my team, and we'll see. We'll see whether the NFL has evaluated him correctly or not. But there's another guy at the end of this draft that I would take an even stronger stance on, that I think also is probably a 40-yard dash time decision that probably was not something I would agree with.
All right, so let's go ahead and talk about that. KJ Hill goes in the 7th round to the Los Angeles Chargers with the 220th pick. And from about the start of the 4th round, you're like, okay, is this where KJ Hill goes? Oh, Tampa Bay, Tom Brady loves his slot receivers. New England, they love their slot receivers. Where's he going to go? And then he just kept falling and falling. And talking to Ryan Day today, you could almost hear the anger in his voice. About it. And he said, I've never seen anybody able to cover KJ Hill. So I don't care how fast you are. Speed doesn't matter if you're always getting open and you catch the ball. And he makes a pretty good point. If the receiver's job is to get open and catch the ball, doesn't matter how fast he is if he always does his job. And it's not like he's out there running a 4.92, like Steve Largent. Who knows? I'm sure Steve Largent was faster than that, but whatever. But so that's why I asked Day, like, as you're watching this, are you getting angry? Are you getting frustrated? And he said he's like frustrated and confused like everybody else. Why is this guy slipping? But I think everybody expects him to latch on well. He did well at the Senior Bowl and was surprisingly getting open against everybody and catching everything. And if you can do that in the NFL, I suppose there will be a job for you for as long as the knees hold out and the shoulders hold out and all of that good stuff. But 7th round, Tom, I did not have him there. I was thinking 4th or 5th simply because of the production. He is the all-time leading receiver at Ohio State, the only receiver at Ohio State with 350 catch seasons. But also, nobody was talking about him as, we weren't expecting a 1st or 2nd rounder because we know what he is. But also, Tom, what he is he's a guy who always gets open and catches the ball. So there is a spot for that.
Right. He is what he is. And that's true both in a positive and a negative way. The negative way is he ran a 4.6. He ran a 4.6 flat. I do wonder if he ran a 4.55, which is not really meaningfully faster. Would he have gone 2 rounds earlier? Like, maybe. He is what he is, because he's not running the Paris Campbell time, but he is what he is, which is the leading receiver in Ohio State football history, which means he had more receptions than Paris Campbell. He had more receptions than David Boston. He had more receptions than Terry McLaurin. Like, he was just so consistent, so good, so consistent. Like, if you go back and listen to shows during last season, like, every time we get a question like, third in the season, like, who are you throwing to? Like, the answer is always KJ Hill, because it was like, KJ Hill is going to get open, he's going to catch the ball, he's going to get a first down. He's not necessarily going to run for a 90-yard touchdown. That's fine. Sometimes you need first downs too. Making first downs is actually a fairly significant part of being a decent offensive team. Write that down. That's an important point. He was the one, like, there's always guys that are like, oh, that guy went a little earlier than I would have expected, or, oh, that guy went a little later than I would have expected. KJ Hill was the one that was like, what is wrong with you morons? Like, how are you not picking this guy? I saw it, like, Josh Metellus went ahead of KJ Hill. It's like, did the film from the last couple of Ohio State Michigan games get burned? Like, what is going on here? Like, how is how are you not seeing that? How these things have gone the last couple of years? I was genuinely mystified at KJ Hill going as late as he did, and it'll be. I think it was Michael Citro who tweeted that basically like this is going to get spun when KJ Hill turns into a really good NFL receiver. This is going to get spun as a overcoming adversity and the little guy triumphing instead of NFL personnel departments are full of idiots who don't know what they're doing a lot of times, and this is one of those times.
And so his quarterback is Justin Herbert. I believe the Chargers took Herbert with the number 6 pick. And it's a good thing, like, KJ Hill can catch the ball from a variety of directions because that's the way Justin Herbert throws it. So have fun with that. But, 7th round for the all-time leading receiver at Ohio State is a slap in everybody's face from Ohio. And it really is Ohio against the world when you consider KJ Hill's draft position, even though he is an Arkansas native. But whatever. So the final draft pick of the Buckeyes for the Buckeyes was Jayshon Cornell to Detroit. I think I don't know if it was a little bit of a surprise, but he was a successful and productive 3-tech defensive tackle who could get into the backfield. It's just interesting that it's Detroit drafting 2 Buckeyes, it's Baltimore drafting a couple of Buckeyes, Cleveland drafting no Buckeyes, whatever. That's fine. But Cornell was one of the most unselfish guys at Ohio State over the past few years because he came in as a high blue chip, high 4-star defensive end, but was probably going to grow into a defensive tackle. And he eventually did that, but then had to play defensive end for an entire season because of depth issues. And then came in this year as the starter at defensive tackle, but because of injuries the first week at defensive end, he started at defensive end. So this is a guy who is versatile, has been and seen quite a bit. And for a 7th round pick, that's to go and get anytime you go get a starter at Ohio State, a starter at Clemson, LSU, Alabama, I think in the 7th round, I think those are good picks because you've seen so much tape against so much competition. So you know what you're getting, and there isn't as much mystery there. But you're also getting a guy from a winning culture and has faced off against the best competition. And if some of those 7th rounders, maybe you want to take a guy you don't know as much about because, like maybe he, this small school guy should have never been a 7th rounder because he wasn't scouted well, and so you take him and maybe you get lucky. Or then you've got a guy like Jayshon Cornell, who I think you know exactly what you're getting, and maybe you'll get a little bit more, and he'll do something for you.
Yeah, he was someone who, I don't want to say he's a tweener, but he was almost a little bit of a tweener at Ohio State, where it was like, well, he could be either one of them, and he sort of grew from one to the other, but if you're a 3-tech and you're still, quick enough to be able to be a defensive end, you really are kind of in between those two. But I think that if you ask people when he came in as a recruit, what would you expect from him out of him during his career? You would probably consider the end result, that the end result probably did not match what the expectation was, but last year he had 30 tackles, 6.5 for loss, 4 sacks. I mean, that's a pretty good season for an interior lineman. And, he's spent 4 years with Larry Johnson. He is probably a fairly developed, about as ready as you're going to be in terms of being a prospect, going into the NFL. He's been coached well. His technique's pretty good and in a position to be a decent pro player. So yeah, I was not necessarily expecting him to get drafted, but I wasn't surprised by it. It was that was about where you thought he might go if he got picked. But yeah, I mean that was awesome. That was a cool moment because it was I'm sure just watching that ticker, you have as a little kid, growing up, dreaming about playing, potentially in the NFL, seeing your name go across that ticker during the NFL draft, that had to be a pretty cool moment for him.
Yeah, and so those were the 10 Buckeyes drafted. 5 other guys signed undrafted free agent deals. Liam McCullough to the Raiders, Rashad Berry to the Patriots, who twice earlier in the day or the day before, the Patriots traded up to take tight ends. So, it's going to be a loaded room there. Maybe he plays some defense instead. Austin Mack and Benjamin Victor both signed with the Giants. Those two guys can not get away from each other. And now they're going to be battling against each other, possibly for a roster spot. Brandon Bowen to the Panthers. Still waiting to hear where Robert Landers is going. But you look at these undrafted guys. Liam McCullough, I tweeted this out the other day, the only perfect Buckeye in Ohio State history. I expect him to be in the league for as long as he wants. Rashad Berry, it's going to be tough for him because you talked about Jayshon Cornell being a tweener. Austin Mack, Ben Victor, Tom, neither ever quite lived up to it. And now they'll both be going against each other. And then Brandon Bowen, who can play, right tackle, any of the guard spots. You hope the best for him because he's been through so much. Anything stick out there from those 5 or 6?
Liam McCullough seems like, of those guys, the most likely to be on an NFL roster for 5+ years. Like, he just, how many long snapper jobs are there? Not very many. So that's a tough spot to be in. But I feel like if he makes a team, he's going to be, he'll be on that team forever. Just he was just so good and so consistent. The other guy who I think is interesting to think about is Bowen, because the flexibility that he has, he was a very good, consistent player for the Buckeyes last year, but he also, the flexibility that he has, NFL teams are not carrying 17 offensive linemen like college teams are. So if you're a consistent, reliable backup who can be the backup in, 4 spots on the offensive line, that would be a pretty valuable thing to have as the 8th offensive lineman on a team, something like that. Like that, you could put together a pretty good multi-year career just out of that. Yeah, I would be interested to see if I think those two are the two that I would expect to have potentially the best chance to make a team coming out of camp. But the Ben Victor and Austin Mack going to the same team was very strange to me because you're going head to head against each other potentially for a roster spot. And I have not paid particularly close attention to the Giants wide receiver depth chart, but I know they weren't very good last year, so they you've got a chance to make a team, at least one of them out of camp. And they're both this in the same way that Terry McLaurin was so appealing because he does all the little stuff. Like if you are a good, consistent blocker and put forth good, consistent effort, like that's going to go a long way towards potentially at least getting you on a practice squad or something like that. I mean, those are all guys that I could see, drawing an NFL paycheck for a while.
Yeah, I'm with you. Now I'm with you. Before we wrap up, Tom, let's touch a little bit on Michigan, who also had 10 players drafted, which lets you know, like, Ohio State and Michigan pretty even on the field, just based on this. But Cesar Ruiz was the first rounder, the center, went 24th to New Orleans. But Donovan Peoples-Jones, you alluded to him earlier, drafted in the 6th round to the Cleveland Browns, who love drafting Michigan players. The 187th pick overall. Tom, you tweeted out the other day that if Urban Meyer and Kerry Combs drive through a blizzard to recruit you, perhaps you should listen. Donovan Peoples-Jones did not listen, and I'm not going to say it cost him, in the draft, but it's clear that he could have gone anywhere else other than Michigan and would have likely been drafted higher than he was. He could have gone to Michigan State and done better. He could have gone to Dayton, who had a tight end taken in the fourth or fifth round. He could have gone anywhere and been selected higher than he was by going to Michigan, where I wrote routinely in Michigan Monday about how underutilized he was. And, I was going back and, one game he had 6 catches for 38 yards. That's great. But, he's not this, you don't have to turn him into some tiny slot receiver that you're running tunnels for. He's 6'2". He's an elite athlete. He's fast. And he was just wasted at Michigan and would have been used so much better anywhere else. Ohio State, Ohio U, Abilene Christian, I'm sure he would never admit to being wrong about his choice, but he doesn't have to. We know it.
Well, you look at what he came in as and then what he ended up as. He came in, he was the number 12 overall player in the class of 2017, number 1 wide receiver. And you look at what he did during his career, 3 seasons, he had 103 receptions and 1,327 yards. Like that's like a KJ Hill season. Like that's just it, 14 touchdowns from scrimmage in his career. That is, and so the numbers aren't huge. What did he get to do in college? He got to go to the Peach Bowl and lose to Florida. He got to lose the Citrus Bowl to Alabama. And it was just such a waste. Like, I find it hard to believe. I mean, he and Cam Akers are the 2 people in the last couple of years that were like, that is just, you really set yourself up for failure by putting yourself in the situation that you did. Mm-hmm. It's really frustrating to see like talented players who should be exciting highlight reel players who are just kind of like, nah, it was fine. Like, what is your defining Donovan Peoples-Jones memory from his time at Michigan? I mean, he had a punt return against Ohio State in 2017 that was
right.
Almost for a touchdown. That was as a true freshman. It was a punt return. Like, outside of that, like I can't think of like a real like highlight moment from him that really like pops out immediately. Like, I mean, I can remember other plays, but it was just kind of like that's the one that stands out, because that was the like, oh crap, look at how amazing this kid is, true freshman, and then just it never turned into anything. And last year they had a 5-star quarterback in Shea Patterson, who was the number 1 quarterback in his class. They had a 5-star wide receiver in Donovan Peoples-Jones, who was the number 1 receiver in his class. And it ended up with Donovan Peoples-Jones having 34 catches, 438 yards, and 6 touchdowns. Like, that's just, it's really pretty unimpressive. And, it's sad to see talent like that and potential like that just kind of, it wasn't like he got in trouble and it was like a wasted talent story, like a Maurice Claret kind of wasted talent story. It was just kind of like, the really smart kid who doesn't apply himself. Mm-hmm. And, you look at what he's getting dinged for by draft experts, and it was technique and effort. And you wonder if he was getting coached by Brian Hartline and in the same wide receiver room as Paris Campbell and Terry McLaurin and Johnny Dixon as a freshman and a sophomore. Like, how different would his career have looked with that kind of leadership around him and the, constantly being pushed to be your best, rather than just kind of like, yeah, well, he's a 5-star, so what are you going to say? It's the same thing as like Jabril Peppers and Rashawn Gary at Michigan. Like, they came in super, super hyped, and it was just like, yeah, they're okay and they're fine. And I mean, those guys at least ended up being 1st-round picks, kind of middle of 1st round. But Peoples-Jones, it was just kind of sad. Like, it was just kind of a waste to see him just kind of like languishing up there and not ever actually live up to what he could have been. He
never had a 100-yard game in his 3 years. And you talk about the culture of the guys around him, who is bringing him along as a freshman. The other receivers were Grant Perry, who was a junior, Kakoa Crawford, who was a sophomore and eventually, I believe, transferred out. Tariq Black was a freshman that same year, burst onto the scene, I think in one game, and then did nothing after that. Eddie McDoom, who I flamed out. So there is no culture. There was no culture. And Nico Collins redshirted that year, I believe. So really, he just, I don't want to say he never had a chance, because he did. He definitely had a chance. But, he could have, he's got his chance now with the Browns. That's what Ryan Day said today about KJ Hill. He's got his chance now, and you don't want to get hung up on where they went. But, you can talk all you want about what he never did at Michigan, because there, that happened. He had 10 catches in his career against Ohio State. Was never what he could have been. Urban Meyer said he should have been a top 10 pick, and I don't know that he even went in the top 10 in the 6th round. So, but that's Michigan. They 10 draft picks. I don't know if and 4 offensive linemen. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing for the coming season. We'll see. Losing 10 guys from Michigan right now does not feel like it's going to help. But again, if as long as they're replacing them with better players, that's one thing. I don't know that they are.
I have a pretty good sense that they probably aren't. To lose 4 offensive linemen to the NFL draft, that's great. That's cool. And that'll be on all sorts of recruiting flyers. But what did they do with it? When you have 4 offensive linemen, it's like, wow, then you really, what an incredible rushing attack you had. And, your quarterback had all day to throw, and it was incredible. Michigan, with its 4 NFL drafted offensive linemen last year against Ohio State, 26 carries, 91 yards, 3.5 yards per rush. Even when they have people that turn into decent players, and it still doesn't add up to anything. I mean, they had 4 guys who were drafted as NFL offensive linemen, a 5-star quarterback ranked as the number 1 player in the country in his high school senior year, a wide receiver ranked as the number 1 wide receiver in the country in his high school senior year, and it's like, oh, and that's what they got. That's what they got out of it. I mean, I'm not shocked at the offensive line production. I mean, you saw Ed Warner was a very good position coach when he was at Ohio State, but just the results are not there to actually turn that into recruiting success. And if you're not bringing in high enough ranked recruits, you can develop them and they turn into pretty good players, but you don't ever get over the hump. And that's kind of where they are right now.
Yeah, 3.96 yards per carry last year. 9 games last year, they averaged under 4 yards per carry. Against Wisconsin, they rushed for 40 yards. Against Michigan State, 83. Indiana, 87. Ohio State, 91. The fact that they ran for 162 yards against Alabama last year tells you that was not a very good Alabama defense, as we all knew. The Michigan offense this year might be better just because Shea Patterson is gone, and now you'll have a quarterback who'll be more willing to run. But who's blocking for those guys? Because Cesar Ruiz is definitely a loss. Ben Bredesen is a loss at guard. Michael Onwenu is another loss at guard. But until these guys can run the ball, they're never going to be what they think they should be, and they haven't been able to run the ball since Denard Robinson was around. And then they couldn't stop it. So what they need to do, you need to be able to run the ball. You need to be able to stop it. You need to be able to throw the ball, and you need to be able to stop the throw. Now, Tom, until they can do all of those things, they're gonna struggle at times, and maybe even struggle against Ohio State.
Well, I wonder what that would look like.
I got a pretty good idea. So, Tom, that's going to do it for today's show. I know we were trying to do shorter shows, but then we started talking and the show went longer. So, That's
you don't have to. Here's go back, only listen to the first half of the show, then pause it, and then listen to the second half of the show, and then boom, 2 shorter shows.
It's like binging.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so we want to thank you all. That's our draft show. We will get back to we'll talk some recruiting early in the week, late midweek. We got some recruiting stuff. Still got to talk about our conversations with the coaches. There's still some stuff from Day that we didn't even get to today that we can probably incorporate. We are still planning to eventually, we've got some listener questions that we've got to get to and request. So we do have stuff in the works. It's just, we wanted to get this one out to you guys today once the draft was finally done. And we were going to do it even earlier, but then Ryan Day had to come on and talk on the conference call. So we had to do that first. But we want to thank you all for listening. Continue to take care of yourselves. Stay safe. Be kind to each other. Be kind on the internet as a person on the internet. There's a lot of mean people there. So be kind. If you're kind on the internet and you're kind at home, I know we're all cooped up. Be kind at Kroger. We got people out there stocking the shelves for us. Just chill. Now, if somebody's being a jerk to you, like another person, like another customer, it's okay to go off on those people. Just leave the workers alone. That's all I ask. So have a good day. We will talk to you later.
the morning.